ready.
Welcome to another episode of Buff in the Rough. I've been blessed to hunt with many different kinds and types of hunters over the years. Men, women, kids, old, middle-aged, young, black, brown, white, rich, middle income, poor, Baptist, Methodist, and at least one fella that attended a snake handling church. All of them had a wide range of experience, from the old-timer that has hunted longer than I've been alive to the brand new first time in the field type hunters. No matter the makeup of the hunting party, we always had a good time. And it's during the hunts that are made up of diverse group of hunters, kind of like the folks I mentioned above, that you can see firsthand the transfer of knowledge from one generation to the next. It's a thing of beauty. I was raised in a family that came from a long line of hunters. My education came early in life. Some of my earliest memories, involve chasing a hound through the fields and woods. It's easy to forget that many folks aren't as privileged as I was. They don't come from a family of hunters and struggle to talk to, I'm going to use air quotes here, real hunters, to learn the do's and don'ts of hunting with hounds. That's the motivation behind today's episode. We're going to address a couple of topics that came straight from our listeners. Jordan Grindstaff from East Tennessee wrote in to ask about gun-shy dogs and can gun shyness be corrected. Jordan is a new rabbit hunter and hungry to learn all that he can about beagles. Jordan, just so you know, I've tried to email you a few times and your mailbox is full. So feel free to reach out again. I'd love to talk dogs with you anytime. We're also going to address a very common question from new hunters, which is what type of gun and ammo should I use? I get this one a lot. So I thought I'd enlist a couple of previous guests that were heavy on the gun dog experience side to help us answer Jordan's question. So today we're going to hear from Jeremiah Burris and Levon Johnson, two longtime gun dog hunters that have a wealth of knowledge to share. Help me welcome Jeremiah and Levon to the program. Well, hey Jeremiah, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Buff. It's good to be back.
I'm glad I got you back so fast. I mean, it seems like we were just doing this a couple days ago.
Yes, sir.
Well, listen, this has been a show in the making for quite some time. I'm going to call this show the Mailbag show. It's where we take a question or questions from some of the viewers and just ask some of the seasoned hunters for feedback. And this question came in, and it's really directed at gun dogs. And I was thinking that you had spent a lot of time gun dogging before you ever went to a competition hunt. So Jeremiah, just to refresh people's memories, could you tell us maybe just what part of the country you're in and how long you've been a gun hunter and anything else you want to tell us about your gun hunting days? Like how many dogs or pups do you think you've raised up gun hunting over the years?
Yes, sir. I'm from Blacksburg, South Carolina. It's not, too far from. It's probably about an hour or so from Charlotte. That's probably one of the bigger cities known from around where I'm at. I've been gun hunting now for about 11 years or so, 10, 11 years, about give or take. And the number of dogs that we went through within those years, I could bet probably at least 50, 60 dogs. Some dogs don't make the cuts, and we had some breedings and sold puppies. So give or take 50, 60 dollars, if not more, I would say, we done raised over the past 10 years.
Well, that sounds good. That's a lot of experience, a lot of shoe leather being worn out chasing those dogs through the briar patches. Well, here's my question. So if someone gets a dog that is gun shy, can you fix it? And if so, how do you fix it?
Well, every dog is different. I'm not going to say that the dog can't be gun shy broke, and I'm not going to say that they can be, but there are things that I believe you can do to, be able to try to encourage the dog that noise is not a bad thing. Gunshots, depending on, how close to the dog it is, it can be loud and scary for a dog. One thing I would recommend doing is if you got a dog you believe is gun shy, or, to prevent it from being gun shy, this can go both ways. when you go to the kennel, just make some noise. It ain't got to be a lot of loud noise. You can start off with something like clapping. Do like some clapping or banging a few pans. If you see that the dog is timid, you might want to lower the volume on how loud you're clapping or how loud you're banging your pan. And just do that and let the dog know associated with good. When you bang the pan and do some clapping, you feed your dog, and just keep repeatedly doing that until you realize that the dog don't seem as timid as much. Then if the dog comes out of that, you can upgrade the amount of noise that you're making, just so the dog associate that the noise is not a bad thing. When the dog hears noises, it's going to associate that with eating. And so that'll, show the dog that, okay, something being so loud isn't as scary as I'm assuming it to be, rather than a dog just sit up in the quiet all day and his gun shy and you take it out and you just shooting and that's the only time it's hearing noises. It's going to be a lot harder to break that dog when that's the only time that dog is hearing a lot of noise.
Mm-hmm. And so you do that for pups that you raise yourself? I mean, so that goes for all of them?
Yes, sir. Okay. When we around, and especially with my dogs, they're in the country, so they're always hearing gunshots off in the distance, whether it's from the neighbor or my uncle over there shooting. They're typically used to noise, or when I go to the kennel, I yell at the dogs, not in a bad way, but, just making some noise to, introduce the dog to noise. You don't want to just go out there, the dog been around something quiet his whole life, and then you usually get the shooting, and the dog freaks out because they don't know what's going on. But if you would learn to adapt that dog to noises and you can, after, do some pans or some clapping, you can also go off in the distance and, I wouldn't say shoot a shotgun, something a little less louder, maybe a pistol or a .22 rifle, just to be able to introduce that dog to some noises and show that dog, okay, nothing's going to happen to me when I hear loud bang. There's certain things you can do that I'll say would be able to help break that dog or prevent that dog from being gunshot.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Jeremiah. I really appreciate you taking time to answer that question.
Yes, sir.
All right, Jeremiah. Question number 2 from the mailbag. And so this is just pulling on your years of experience. If you were to recommend to a new rabbit hunter, I mean, they're just getting started. They don't know anything. What kind of gun and ammo would you recommend to a new hunter?
Well, I started off, and I'm not going to make this recommendation. I'm just going to go through my years of experience. I started off, I was like 11, 12-year-old. My dad didn't want to just throw me out there with a big gun, so I started off with a 410 single-shot shotgun, and I tell you, I could not hit the side of a barn with this gun. And, everybody out there, they got their pumps and their automatics, and I just got one shot, so my first year rabbit hunting, I did not kill a single rabbit with that gun, and I told my dad, I said, this is not going to work. So he handed me, my girlfriend, she used this gun now. It's a 20-gauge Mossberg. And so I started using that, and I probably killed 85-90% of the rabbits I was using. And my brother had a 12-gauge, so one day he left I left my gun in my house one day, and I used my brother's gun, and I came to the conclusion that 12 gauge really wasn't for me. I don't got no hate against it. I go out, shoot skeets with it, just shoot it for fun. But when it comes to hunting, I love a 20 gauge. The lighter the gun is, the better the gun is. Stoker, they make some pretty light guns. You ain't got to go buy nothing real expensive, just something durable. Me personally, I like an automatic over a pump. You gun hunting, you want to kill a rabbit that between that pump and just pulling the trigger, that split second, will determine a lot of rabbits you kill, especially some of the areas we hunt in. You don't got much time to shoot because it's so thick. So if you got 2 shells to let out, you can let them out quickly with an automatic over a pump. And the shots I like to use, I like 6 shots. During the pandemic, it was scarce and hard to find because everybody was buying all the bullets. So I had to resort to 7.5, even 8 shots sometimes. And I feel like they're good, but they're not as reliable. I shot plenty of rabbits with them and didn't kill the rabbit right there on the instinct. I hit the rabbit and the rabbit still run 10, 15 yards before it would fall over dead and the dogs catch it. But from my experience, from how I've been hunting, a 20 gauge automatic with 6 shot shells is my go-to.
Great advice. I really appreciate that, and sound logic makes a lot of sense.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremiah. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Well, hey, Levon, how are you doing? It's good to hear your voice again.
I'm doing very good, very good. How about yourself?
I can't complain. I really appreciate you coming back on this special mailbox episode where we're just taking some questions from listeners and addressing them. And I couldn't think of a better person to ask about gun dogging and questions about gun dogs than you. But just to refresh people's minds, would you just kind of remind us maybe where you live in the country and a little bit about your gun dog experience? Maybe how long you've been doing it, or if you had to guess how many dogs that you've worked with over the years. You know, if you had to put a number on it, what would that look like?
Oh, okay. Well, hey, I'm in northeastern Illinois, the very very far north corner of Illinois, which is Joliet, Illinois, about 45 miles southwest of Chicago, Illinois. And I would say, I've gun hunted over the last 35 plus years, and primarily, if I had to put a number on how many gun dogs have I hunted over, it would easily exceed 100 dogs for sure, without a doubt. It's a very rewarding process for sure. Mm-hmm. To get a puppy from weaning stage, getting them started, locked in on running a rabbit, and then convert him over to a gun dog, mm-hmm. meaning gun hunting over him for the hunting season. One of the biggest challenges is just being patient with that dog, with that puppy, introducing them to the gun. I found over the years that if we start in the kennel by while you're feeding or even just messing around, socialization, just make noises with your feeding bowls or anything, start out gradual noises that will simulate the sound of a gun. And also, as talk with several guys, they would go as far as recording the sound of a shotgun going off, and they would hang that speaker in that kennel, and periodically throughout the course of the day, they'll turn that volume up, gradually introducing the puppy to that sound. It made for a smoother process, but when you get done trying all the different methods, I found that if you first make sure that he's out of a gun dog stock of dogs, it makes it a lot more easier, because if you buy him from an exclusive field trial guy, he may not gun hunt, or if he does, it's only for maybe a week or two during the season, and as a result, that particular dog don't necessarily produce a gun dog. They have a tendency of producing gunshot. Or puppies that's hard to break from the gun. Mm-hmm. And I've experienced it firsthand here in Illinois. I was buying a lot of started dogs from guys that did not gun hunt. They were strictly trialers. And then when it was time to gun break them, it took a lot longer because those guys did not gun hunt. Not saying that it can't be done. It can be done. But it just tend to take longer, provided if you buy a puppy from a guy that gun hunt, it's an easier transition if you follow precaution, and you have to be very, very intentional. And I've learned the hard way. About 8 years ago, I had three puppies. They were actually going with the dogs. By the time hunting season started. Mm-hmm. but they wasn't started. And I had a terrible incident to where one of those puppies, I shot. By mistake. It was a complete error on my part. The number one thing, is when we're gun hunting, is first do what? Identify the target. Mm-hmm. Never just shoot at moving grass. And that's what happened. But I still was able to get that puppy. I saved her life. It was bad. It really was. I used all home remedies and getting her healed up. And I made an oath to that puppy laying there. If she survived, she'll never leave my kennel. And to this day, she's still here, and she's right at 8 years old. And she's a solid rabbit dog. And the lesson I learned from that was, if the puppy is not running, leave her at home and get her started on rabbits first, and then gradually introduce her to the gun. I hunt a lot by myself, and it makes it a lot easier to train a dog in that capacity during gun season, because I don't do rapid fire. I hunt with over-on the shotgun, and it's generally a 28 gauge. Every once in a while I use a 20, but it's mainly my 28 gauge, and it's one shot. Every once in a while it's a 2-shot. Whereas, there's a pause in between the shots, especially when you got a dog or a puppy out there that has not been gun hunted over, but they're running good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You make sure that before you fire that first shot, that they have made a full circle and they're on their way. He's far enough away from you to whereas when you make that shot, you're able to locate where that puppy is and engage his response. Don't do a rapid fire. Generally, if he's locked in prior to hunting season, you take him out there to gun hunt. You let him make a couple of circles. And I would strongly recommend before gun season is to use a blank pistol while you're running during the off season and make some shots in the air and see how he responds, and just gradually work your way up to a 22 rifle, shoot it in the air, and if he sees they're still, he's still in place, give him a week or two of that, and then use a 410. Those are not massive sounding guns that's going to startle him right out the gate, and work your way up to that gun of your choice. Rather it be a 410, 28 gauge, or 20 gauge, or a 16 gauge, or even 12 gauge shotgun. I found that worked out so much easier for me. Is to first make sure he's out of a gun stock, and then get him running good. Never take a green puppy out there with you gun hunting. You're setting yourself up for failure, to have massive problems. And then don't take him with a crowd of guys, bang, bang, banging all over the place. That it'll drive him crazy. He'll find you or the truck, and that's just a nightmare experience. But I've experienced the most horrific part of the process. I learned the hard way, and I really knew better. You get so comfortable and you get to trying different things, and man, it could go bad real fast and make you feel like absolutely dirt, less than dirt when that tragedy happened. I pulled, and when that incident happened, it took probably about 2 months for that puppy to bounce back, and she was 6 months old. And I waited until the following spring and got her started, and she never looked back. Once gun season rolled around again, you never would believe that that dog had gotten shot. And to me, that's about as bad as it will ever get.
Mm-hmm.
You can have those experiences where they're just naturally afraid of the sound, but when you have one that gets shot, and the chances of you bringing that dog back around to become a good gun dog, man, the odds are not in your favor. But by the grace of God, it all worked out, and she's still in my kennel. It still runs a good rabbit.
Well, that's an amazing story, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because I know it's probably not an easy story to share. That's a tough story.
Yeah, when you reached out to me the other day, I said, "Man, this really has come full circle." To talk about a subject like that, and it really has been a tough process, because I really didn't think that she would come around and be okay under that gunfire after that had happened. It was an absolute tragedy, but for a dog to recover from that, and especially from a puppy, it was definitely a blessing that she got out of it, and I've raised a litter of puppies out of her as well.
Wow, Levon, that says a lot about your commitment to the dog, but also that it is possible. It is possible for a dog that is gun shy to recover, and like you said, that's kind of the worst case scenario for her, but she made it. I think she made it, and so that's a great story, and I really appreciate you sharing that. But talking about, I want to spin to another question while I have you, and that's and this is kind of an advice question to youngsters that are just getting started. So if you had a new rabbit hunter coming up to you and they were asking you for your advice on what kind of gun or ammo that they should get, I mean, what do you recommend for those new hunters?
That's a good question. I was always a big fan of a 20 gauge shotgun in this last 5 years. I learned that it doesn't take that heavy a gauge or shotgun to kill a rabbit. And I went from the 20 gauge all the way down to a 410, and I found it to be a lot more of a challenge using the 410. It still can be done. I know some guys are expert at killing rabbits with 410, but I found that the 28 gauge is a happy medium, meaning it gives you some grace, versus a 410. It's a smaller shell and a tighter pattern. But with a 28 gauge, it's a little bit bigger shot, a little bit bigger shell, and you could not be so good of a shot and still recover the rabbit. And I've used it faithfully every time I go. It's an over/under 2 shots. It makes you be more of a disciplined shooter. And sometimes when we're using a semi-auto, we get a little, we gamble sometimes, because we know if the first shot missed, we still got 2 more. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
But using that 28 gauge over/under, you got to make it count, because he's not going to give you a lot of shots before he gets out of range. And it has good range. I've killed a lot of rabbits 25, 30 yards with it. Use your heavy loads, number 4 or number 5 shot. Use what's that over/under? Use a modified choke on the top barrel, and on the bottom barrel, use a full choke, meaning you're going to shoot from that. Typically, you'll shoot from that bottom barrel first. Some guys like to shoot from the top barrel, but I like shooting from the bottom barrel first, and then the top barrel secondly. And you'll be amazed at how many rabbits you can safely harvest, and you're not going to be eating pellets when it's time to eat that rabbit at dinner time. You're not going to be pulling pellets out of them. That right there was a deal breaker for me versus using a 20 gauge. There's so many shots you tend to, it'll wreck the meat sometimes. But with that 28 gauge, it's a perfect gun to whereas eventually, over time, if you start out with the 28 gauge and you get real good at it, then the next step will be to go to the 410. I'm not a big fan of the 20 gauge, and certainly it's an absolute no-no for a 16 or a 12 gauge for me. And that's just from my vantage point. I killed a lot of rabbits, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot with the 28 gauge. And you don't have all that recoil, very minimal recoil. You can carry that gun. If you hunt 6 hours, the weight of that gun will not be a problem at the end of the hunt. Versus, your bigger guns, your 20 gauge or your 12 gauge, like, man, after 4 hours, like, wow, it's time to lean this gun up against a tree for a minute to give my shoulders a rest. So, and also, another sweet caveat, it's not as loud as the other ones either. It's a pow. So, some instances, it's like the rabbit didn't even hear it when I missed it.
Well, speaking of carrying these things around, do you have some kind of sling or something that you have on it?
No, I never used the sling because it was so light. It's unbelievably light. If you try one, man, you'll thank me later. I'll tell you that. Try one, and if you're not fully convinced, keep your 20 gauge or whatever heavier gauge that you shoot. But try that 28 gauge. Get you a box of shells and give it a try.
Well, let me ask you this: the gun that you use, is it a synthetic stock? Is it a wood stock?
It's a wood.
It's wood, and it's still light.
It's the Stevenson 555. Got the ejector chokes, meaning when you shoot and unload or whatever, you break it down, the shells pop out. It's a pretty nice shotgun, and it doesn't break the bank. I think I paid like $500 for it. Of course, that was 5 years ago. It's probably a little bit more now, but it was very economical, very functional. I might have one little scratch on it, but it's still in real good shape. I won't leave home without it. And I think if you're pretty good at using a 20 gauge, I think you'll adjust to a 28 gauge easily.
And I hear you on especially the weight of it. If you think about a youngster having to carry that thing around all day, that extra weight makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does. It really does. It's a very, very, very light gun. And I try to make it, keep it exciting. Sometimes you have to challenge yourself. And man, you only got 2 cracks at it. You're going to be patient. You're going to be very more selective in your shot choice. And then have confidence in your dog to bring the rabbit back around.
That's right.
You say, well, I don't think I'll take that shot. And you'll find you'll have a higher success ratio. You'll have a lot of shells left over. You won't go through nearly as many.
Well, very good. Levon, thank you so much for coming back on and helping us answer some of these frequently asked questions. Thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate that. Hey, if there's anything I can do for you, just feel free to reach out, and I'll do my very best.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate you. I hope this was helpful to you, Jordan, and anyone else listening that may be in the early stages of your hunting career. A special thanks to Jeremiah and Levon for opening up and sharing their past ups and downs. Remember that mistakes are going to happen, and it always seems like I learned a lot more when I messed up than when things went smoothly. It just kind of works out that way in life. Grab that hound, hit the briars, and have fun out in God's creation. Thank you for listening to Buff in the Rough. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to be notified when new content is available. And please send comments and suggestions to buffintherough@gmail.com.